with a long name. Katherine Maunakea, Wahine, Maunakea. I've lived in Nānākuli over 60 years. And Nānākuli has changed a lot since that time. I was born in Maui in 1907. So that makes me 21 years young. You can guess the rest of it. There has been a lot of changes in Nānākuli. There were no houses, there's a few here and there. When I moved at Nānākuli, the roads were dirt roads. Naturally, from year to year, there has been some improvement. Most of our early years we fought for water. There was no water that comes to the pipe. It was just drips, and you have to be home to get water in the pipes because there would be only certain hours. There was no schools, there was no churches, so our children didn't have a schoolhouse. We didn't have a church. I can recall when we first moved, there was so much rocks, cows running wild around. We had to chase them and cleaning the yard, trying to plant. And one of the first plant or a bush was the coconut tree, and it still stands today. We have a yard where we planted lots of onions and potatoes, corn, you name it. Today I'm not sorry. We have all the fruit trees in the yard, and we have water flowing. And the richest thing I thought is because of our health. The Lord blessed us with 5 children. So we lived in, all of them of course grown up, but working in the yard, making use of our hands. I recall the philosophy my dad left. Ne huli kalima iluna, pule ka ʻōpio, ne huli kalima ilalo, pia ka ʻōpio. It means if your hands are turned out, you're lazy, you're vigor. But when it's turned down to the earth, your stomach will always be filled. I came to Honolulu when I was 7 years old, came back to my mother from Maui. She was here first. Then I went to sister school, and in sister school you learn to sing and to go to church and learn whatever they have. I stayed with my mother who had several small children. Later, as I grew older, I married Edwin Maunakea, and I met him in church. A good place to catch a husband. My husband was a good fisherman. He saw that we had fish. He'd get up so early in the morning, and when he came back, we had fish for breakfast. And, of course, he was very good with a net. We had several nets. Sometimes he'd go alone, sometimes he'd take the children with him apart, and they'd lobster net, and so we had lobster. Today you can't get lobster, you have to buy them, but there was so much at one time in Nānākuli, around our area. He even taught the children how to patch the nets. We had nets, one hanging here, one hanging there, and everybody had a chance to learn to mend the nets. Then we had just one store, so we were fortunate to have chickens and have our own eggs and ducks. So we did have ducks quack, quack, quack here, quack, quack, quack there, and we had plenty of eggs.
She loves to tell about how she first went out to Nānākuli and first established one of the first homes there in Nānākuli homestead with no water, no infrastructure at all, and just kiawe trees and the pohaku and the ʻAina there, and how rough the living was at that time. And yet she and her family and other pioneers who started way back there around 1930 survived. So they represent a generation of survivors who learned to live entirely off the land and the sea.
1935, I joined the University of Hawaii Mothers Club. It was very interesting because all the mothers got together and learned different things, how to budget, and because we were limited with so many no stores around, we had to do what we had. I later helped Marie Solomon to open a Hawaiian village, which I became her assistant. It was very interesting because we had lots of tourists going through the village, learning different things. And that's where we had the fellowship of getting together with other artisans, doing the quilt, lauhala, pule pounding, flower planting, you name it. Now we are ready to talk about puhala. The tree is called puhala, and the leaves is called lauhala. We make mistake by saying lauhala tree. It's puhala. And those leaves are very important because you can make beautiful mats with it, hats. Oh, and anything as you see in most stores now, you see the hats. To go and pick them, preparation was the most important thing. You can make lots of things with a lauhala. How fascinating some of the things you wouldn't think they would make. Of course, hats was something very important to the Hawaiians, but I think the mat seemed to be very interesting because when we were at Oʻahu, I remember we went over a lecture with the tourists and the old folks, how they slept on the floor, on the ground rather, no beds. But they said to make a place comfortable, they would get rocks, not too big of rocks, maybe a 4 or 5 inch diameter, and you lay that first on the ground, then you put little smaller pebbles, then layers and layers of sand, clean sand from the ocean. And then they would put mats. They would put 2 or 3 layers of mats down with a big weave. Then to use it for blanket is the very fine one. And it was used for blanket. I was kind of surprised. I was kind of curious about putting a sleep with a mat instead of a fine mat on you, thinking that you're not going to get warm. But I tried it. And it's very warm, it's comfortable. And if you like to be much warm, you just get a bug partner and you get a mat partner. Then you'll keep warm for sure.
I began working at the Bernese Pauahi Bishop Museum in 1984, and at that time, and until today, they feature Hawaiian crafts, lauhala weaving, quilting, featherwork, and what have you. And it was in 1984 that I first had the opportunity to meet Kupuna Maunakea. She was involved in lauhala weaving and was just a real ʻolu person. Sitting down and talking with her and getting to know her was really, really wonderful.
So I first came to know Kakalina Maunakea, as she identified herself. Kakalina. She told us that that's the only name she knew until she went to school and was told that her name was Catherine. So we came to know Auntie Kakalina Maunakea. Around 1985, we were attempting at that time to contact Kupuna Maunakea and to bring them together in order to share their experiences. So that's what we did in 1985 at the University of Hawaii. So that was the first island-wide conference for Kupuna Maunakea from all of the main islands, in which they shared their experiences and their knowledge and their practices with other kupuna. And that historic conference was videotaped. And so that was the beginning of an attempt to organize the Kupuna Maunakea. That conference was sponsored by the University of Hawaii. At that time, Hawaiian Studies program, ʻAina, which is a Native Hawaiian health professional organization founded in March 1986, and Alulike. So that gathering at the university was really the beginning of organization of these practitioners, Native Hawaiian traditional practitioners, who formally organized themselves last year, 1992, in Ho'onaunau. So they're now officially known as Kupuna Laba'o, and Kupuna Maunakea is one of the founding charter members of that important organization.
It was believed that if you had a tree there, you didn't worry about the doctor coming to your house when a baby is sick, crying and feverish. That baby has a fever, they would get the young kukui and use it for medicine. The flowers was used for medicine. And if you had a hangover, that's your alka-salsa. You take the flowers and chew it and swallow it and drink plenty of water. You sober up quick. The kukui nut is used for oil. And you could actually take the nuts and eat it as one. The Hawaiians did not have no oil in the fry pan like we do now when we want to cook. So they ate the cooked kukui nut. And if you feel nauseated and you think your stomach needs cleaning, you eat one of those nuts. It tastes like Brazil nut. I think you taste it. You should try it. If you haven't, you better try it one. But one is sufficient. If you eat two nuts, you're going to run. Of course, three, too late. Keep it up. I'd like to tell you about the plant called la'i. We have so many here in the yard. And la'i is a must. One of the first traditions is that every Hawaiian houses have to have la'i because la'i was used as a cooking utensil. Everything was cooked. If you needed to cook, was the la'i. We call it la'i, well, the English translate tea leaf. But because we don't have a T in our alphabet, so it's called la'i. From the very shoot to the bottom is used. The tiny shoot in the middle is used when you have a boil, or if you fell, like if you were in the mountain, you fell, you take that the young shoot that's there and you chew it and put it on your, wherever is bleeding, it'll stop the bleeding. It is made of, you can make ropes of it, make it slippers. You could even use it as a person that has a fever. You have a fever, take one of those leaves, put it on your head, it'll help to cool your fever up. My mother always used it. And of course, if a child has fever, you take it and lie down on the bed, make a sheet out of it, and wrap the baby up, or even a big person. I was also told that the la'i was used for embalming with salt. Of course, that's a different story, but we don't use it nowadays, but it is what was used by pounding up with salt to rub on the body. Another good thing about la'i is that if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have a hula skirt. And if the natives was running around, at least that cover what nature gave them. Imagine cooking all your fish, your pork, or whatever in these leaves. Nowadays we've got to have an oven to do that, or tin foil, or not. But that was our tin foil, and that was our package. You went to the mountain, you could make a pu'ola. You know, the pu'ola is take one whole stem, turn it upside down and try it, make a pu'ola. And my dad was fascinated with the fact that he could go in the mountain, pick plenty of gingers, and brought it back in the pu'ola. We talk about the la'i, but the la'i is a package, so when we want to go out and pick up medicine, especially if you have noni, you need more than one, you use the la'i as a package, and you put your noni in it. Noni has so many uses, just as much as the la'i. It is supposed to cleanse your blood. It is good for your boils, for most anything. Of course, in the old days, they used to leave it out in the sun Nowadays we have the refreeze, so we don't worry about. You can take one of the nolis that is kind of yellow, let them bright, not in the sun, just get them bright. Take it and beat it up and take the seeds out, use only the pulp. And if you want to eat it like how you do applesauce, you can. It has no taste. It's only your imagination when you put your nose up. You can just eat it and pretend it's custard.
So even before attempt to organize island-wide these traditional practitioners, Auntie Kakalina on her own was already passing on her knowledge and her skills to others through workshops and classes that she was holding right in her own home and in the Nānākuli Wahine community, and she has continued to do that on her own. And that's the kind of person she is, always sharing, always giving of her knowledge and expertise, not only in the ʻAulapa'au, but in Wahine, our language, and in lauhala crafts. And that's the way she is. So ʻAulapa'au is just one dimension of her many dimensions in giving and sharing of our culture and our traditions.
I'd like to talk about flowers. The Hawaiians have a philosophy that every child is a blossom, is a flower. There are songs about roses spreading out so beautiful. Pule mohala, they have some songs like that of spreading flowers. But we talk about making leis. It is an old custom that you make a lei when you love someone. And so many songs, I wrote several songs on flowers, how they bloom. I've got so much flowers in my yard that my husband, he said, we better plant something else. We can't eat flowers. But flowers are beautiful. They make a beautiful gift. It's a gesture of aloha, of love. Someone you love, you want to give them a flower. And you look like a flower when you are dressed up. But making a lei, you select your flowers in different colors, or you just make it plain. And they didn't have needles, and they would go and pick up, this is what they use for needle, there.
It wasn't until I think probably a year or so later when I happened to be listening to the radio, and there was a beautiful song that has been recorded by several people that Kupuna Maunakea composed, and that song is called Puna Ku'u Aloha. And I knew the song, and I had no idea that it was she who had composed it. So I remember going to work the following day and saying, Kupuna Maunakea, is that your song? And she said, aye, pololei. I said, oh my goodness. So at that point, she was elevated in my mind, not only a kupuna, but a celebrity kupuna.
I've had so many songs written, and it's a whole book of songs that I need to put together. But the impression of things, they like talk about flowers, how pretty the flowers are, how lovely when you weave them, and to whom you give it. So when you have an impression of one line maybe, if the moon was shining bright, you talk about the bright moon, and then you talk about the sea, or you talk about the mountains, or you talk about a person. So you write it down, and sometimes when I'm sleeping, I'm thinking, oh, that's good, that should be a song. Now I know a person, I study the person's life, then it's easy to write a poem about it than set to music. Music is part of our life. I think if without music, I think this would be a dull world. Of course, we love singing, but I like to hear my sisters sing. And they sing such harmony and rhythm. They make the sounds prettier. Aloha Lahaina is a song about the Lahaina Luna school, one of the first boarding school for boys.
ʻAina, ili ku wahine,
really enjoyed having the opportunity to talk to her about some of the songs that she composed. And I think she influenced my own composition as well. Kupuna Maunakea is one of the few kupuna that are around today that do compose. We have a lot of young composers and a lot of composers from a past generation no longer with us, people like Helen Beamer and Charles E. King and what have you, and then a host of contemporary composers. Kupuna Maunakea is rare, I think, in her age group because she very quietly leaves a legacy for people like myself and sets an example.
Today, we think of the many things that we should teach our children. So Nānākuli of Hawaii, which is my title, is something very important. They used to say Hawaiian culture, but it's better to use the Hawaiian term since we are teaching Hawaiian values. And I was happy to find out that Kupuna Maunakea was able to help young children in the schools and in the community understand that there was nothing bad about Nānākuli. And we needed to learn how to build up our self-esteem and our pride so that we would appreciate what we have.
It is very important to me to continue my education in Hawaiian language and culture. From a very young age, we were educated in different Hawaiian things, and so I would like to teach my children how to do those things. Presently, I'm a student at Liwa Community College, and I hope to go on to West Oʻahu College so that I may get my master's eventually in Hawaiian Studies. I am constantly reminded also of how it can be perpetuated with my children and how they can bring back life to the land, because the land seems to have lost its vitality, and I think it can be reborn in its youth. I hope that Kupuna is here for a long time.
In 1992, I had the privilege to represent Governor John Wahine in presenting to Kupuna Maunakea a congratulatory message, commending her on her activities concerning the legacy of Prince Kuhio Kalanianaole. She was interested in perpetuating the information and knowledge concerning homesteaders. Therefore, she instituted the Aha Hakumeli Incorporation to do this perpetuating, to help the young children of the homestead know and understand the legacy about the homestead history.
Another thing that Kupuna Maunakea is responsible for is maintaining the pride in where she's from. You know, being from the Nānākuli homestead and still having a great deal of aloha and respect for the person who left that legacy for us, and that, of course, being Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalanianaole.
I want to teach the children in the classroom the legends, the songs, and medicines, and all the things that we value today for the future of our children. So what Kupuna Maunakea has done for me, I have tried to pass on to others, and I do appreciate what Kupuna Maunakea is contributing to the community. Many of her songs tells about the homestead. Many of her songs tell about the children of the homestead. Many of her songs tell us about the beauty of the land where the homesteads were. The Mea Hawaii is important to all our children, and we must teach them, this younger generation. I'm glad that they have the Kupuna program, because lots of the Kupunas, I started out with them, and they come back learning the language and the value. We hope to have workshops on different things, Mea Hawaii, like salt making, medicine making, and of course kukui, and all the good things of Hawaii.
Just recently, Kupuna called me up at my office at Oʻahu, and shared with me her manaʻo on a song that she had composed called, I think it's called a Prince Kuhio Waltz. And the words to the song describe the beauty of Nānākuli and the homestead, and basically is a mahalo to him. So that's a very typical quality, I think, within our Hawaiian culture, giving honor to ali'i and giving honor to the place that you are from. So basically, Kupuna Maunakea has been very successful in prolonging the existence of things of the past, bringing them here into the present, so that we will take these things along with us into the future.
We talk about Prince Kuhio. Well, because of us living on a homestead, the first generation and the fifth generation must know something about how the land became ours and how the parents worked on the land from 1930 up to 1999. So the only way I could remember telling about Kuhio is in a classroom. It's part of history. If you're teaching the language, naturally teach the beginning and some history, some singing, and of course we are planning now to have our third annual Prince Kuhio Song and Essay Contest. I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to tell you of the many, many gifts that I got. It is because I have faith in the Lord and because He has given me so much. Although I'm crippled, but I make use of my talent by giving Him thanks. And because He has given me all these gifts, He shared with me, so it is my turn to share with my family and anyone who wishes to learn. And I'm so glad that I could share these blessings with you and yours.
Kupuna Maunakea has numerous awards given her in recognition of her contributions to Nānākuli, Hawaii. She was given an honor when she was awarded a living legend by the state of Hawaii. She has published several books, one on lauhala preparation and weaving, a book on Hawaiian medicine, and a prayer book, Katherine Maunakea, Wahine, Maunakea, teacher, inspiration, living legend, Wahine o ʻAina, a woman of the land.
Kalahui Hawaii Mena hopo moi kainui E o mai na pua ʻōpio E makana nui no ia E makana nui no ia, haina ia, I ka mele aloha, no ka ʻaina o pula, e mana.